Good evening, everybody. We are live on our normal Thursday stream. Welcome to this episode of Starman and the Zoomer. Um,
You're
we did
you're
invite,
really hoping
yeah,
that sticks.
I'm hoping that sticks. We did invite Trig this evening, but I think he's busy with other stuff. But we did have a couple of rather classic Starman, but we had our retrospective special and we did our China stream last week. So
Mm.
hopefully you've had your fill of Trig as he returns to his normie world stuff. As he's a filthy casual, and goes outside and stuff.
Touching
Anyway,
grass. Why would you want to do such a thing like that?
he is indeed the filthy grass toucher. But hello. I also, as you can probably tell, welcome now my usual co-host, as you have become since Trig has abandoned us for the real world. Evelyn, fresh back from Mises U.
I am indeed. It was such a laugh. Still, it's like I'm still. I joked to someone sort of on the Friday. Like I still haven't really fully took on that I was there, and it hasn't really all caught up yet. I don't know. It's just amazing, really. I don't know what
And
I want to make
yeah,
sure I once again say thank you to all the people who shared the fund around and whatever else to help me afford flights, and also other people who were helpful in doing things like that. I could not have done it without them. So
oh no, it's been very humbling to have people step forward and be supportive. Segueing into that, I do the normal YouTubey stuff. Um, I know it's really gay, but like, if you do make sure you interact with the channel if you want to keep viewing the videos. It's not even like heard to make our reach bigger, because honestly, I think we get banned if our reach got too big. But if you want to keep seeing them, like, it's very like, subscribe, comment, because that's what YouTube forces you to do. It's
yeah,
just the treadmill, and it's the only way to retain any kind of viewership on this audience. Sorry, viewership of audience on this platform. So that's just the game you have to play. Aside from that, the best way to donate to it is still through Streamlabs. That is where the least cut gets taken, but we are still fully monetized on YouTube, so that means memberships are still open, and you can still send super chats. But be aware that 30% of memberships and super chats do go directly to Susan Wozniacki. She hoovers them up with her shekels proboscis, like a giant fly.
let's at least get to the end of the stream this evening before we get banned. No, there was some great stuff over the weekend. I mean, I don't know. I think there was some people from our sort of circle watched some of the lectures because I know at one point there was a picture floating around the back of my head or something.
um, no, that was me. I
Oh, right.
posted that.
Ah,
No,
right.
I was watching. I just stumbled on the stream. I was eating lunch at work, and I'm like, oh, what's on live on the YouTube? Because I got a notification. It was the Mises University stuff, and I
Mm.
completely disconnected. And then I clicked on it, and I remembered that you were actually there. And I had a moment where I'm like, oh.
No, there was some great talks though. The one by Patrick Newman on the Jacksonians was very good, and we
No
actually have,
Patrick Bateman.
yeah, no, I mean he does look sort of somewhat similar. So I don't know. I also have, of course, obligatory like holiday picture in front of the sign with one turnip and then some of the other people we're hanging about with.
One turnip sounds like some kind of like headquarters building.
Yeah, well, the
We're
turn,
located at one turnip,
yeah,
one
yeah.
turnip square.
But turnip square as opposed to red square.
Yes, of course. I don't know. You could have made like finger guns and been like, some of you guys are all right. Don't go to the Mises Institute tomorrow. But
Hmm. I fancied getting back home though. And then there was also this like really great bit from the end of this is Daniel McAdam's speech on like the Saturday, who, if people don't know, is the guy that basically runs all the Ron Paul Institute kind of stuff and has been co-presenting with him for years. I mean, I was sort of jokingly saying to you before we started, it was like the week was surreal enough on its own, and then I'm sitting having lunch with a guy that's been presenting with Ron Paul for years. What's what is going on here? I've been talking to Jeff Dice, Phil Bishop, all these people all week. It's so strange. But anyway, I will play this because it's very good.
Of all time, Joe Sobran. And this is a quote some of you may know, but I think it's an appropriate finish for what I have to say. If you want government to intervene domestically, you're a liberal. If you want government to intervene overseas, you're a conservative. If you want government to intervene everywhere, you're a moderate. If you don't want government to intervene anywhere, you're an extremist. So here's to all you extremists.
Well said.
Yes, I watched the clip earlier, so I'm having to imagine it because the stream preview slightly behind for me, so I'm just guessing when you're when you're starting and stopping stuff, trying not to talk over it. But yes, it looked very, very fun, and I did catch a bit of the Mises U stuff. It was quite amusing to see you be a little bit. You seemed a little bit warm in that front row, actually.
Yeah, it's supposed to say that it's still. I mean, they've got like really heavy AC, but it's more to get rid of the moisture than the heat so much because it's so humid outside. There's just no way you can get shade. So it's not the sun that's the problem; it's the humidity. But it's still like 23, 24 degrees centigrade in there, but it's like very low humidity and it bites. It's not nice.
Oh man, no. Alabama in July, not the friendliest environment.
No, not necessarily.
To anybody really.
No. However, the stream this evening, I suppose, is somewhat inspired by one of the other lectures, which I'll quickly post a link for in the chat, by Timothy Terrell, where he was talking about the subject of energy economics, and he briefly spoke about, or focused on at one point, how some of the modern sort of policy in regards to fossil fuels and the way that the UN and large organizations like the EU deal with them is actually really heavily hamstringing lots of the developing world. This is not to say that we are all of a sudden the champions of technological progress or anything, but I do find that there are some interesting things about this, and then also when we think further about it, that, you know, we've already seen what collapsing parts of the second and third world does to the first world. So let's possibly get out ahead of knowing whether or not that's going to happen again.
For those watching the VOD, that's obviously in the chat on the side, but if you can't see that for whatever reason, it'll be in the pinned comment as well.
Yeah, I suppose we can just put up the Google Doc, or the contents of it.
Yes, I'll make a sources document again for those watching along later, and you can always come back and look at that if you're hungry for more knowledge with this. But you're talking about modern technology. It's not even modern technology. They're restricting a lot of stuff that's really from like some of it from the 18th century, and most of it really from the 19th and early 20th century. It's, if anything, it's old heavy technology they're being stripped of, and they're being given like soy tech. I don't know if I can coin that term.
Yeah,
I'm just going to start referring to everything that isn't like useful nuts and bolts heavy engineering as soy tech, because it seems to sum it up quite nicely.
This article is obviously because it's some writer in India trying to sort of hand wave to progressives in Europe is about women's issues and lower income, blah, 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 blah. But the sort of general point here, and something to pick up on, is the fact that, you know, we in the West are lucky enough to have had previously town gas networks, and now we have more naturally sort of sourced gas networks, which means it was all plumbed in one big go, and there was a push by a more organized government of one that wasn't India, let's put it that way, to engage in a project with stuff like that. So in a lot of these places there is, I mean, it sounds like I'm sort of saying the obvious here, but there isn't ovens in the way that we would approach them. There is not stoves in the way that we would approach them normally. So their options were things like, as mentioned earlier on, kerosene, and one more we'll get into more heavily is LPG, liquefied petroleum gas.
Yes.
However, policies that they are now bringing in, you know, she mentions it in here, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals number 7, which is their one on climate change stuff and air pollution, air quality, whatever they call it, basically bans this stuff. So people are now engaging in like the style of cooking they've been doing for 1200 years prior, where they're just cooking like scraps of wood, animal dung, or just using like petrol, and essentially trying to hide the fact that they're doing it. Because I tried to find more stuff on the specific charges that they do, But like there is like local sort of fiefdom stuff in places, you know, they've gone to here mentioned Peru and Rwanda, I think is one of the ones that's quite bad for it, where you have like UN uniform touting locals who have been given the job to go and fine everyone for, you know, cooking with the wrong materials and stuff. That have turned them into these like sort of crime fiefdoms where you've then got to go bribe the local UN like carbon ticketing guy so you can like cook the meat you've gone and hunted for and preserve it properly, because if you tried to cook it with scraps of wood you had in your village, it might give you all sorts of horrible diseases.
People concealing it is what's causing the problem. People are
Mm.
creating indoor fires and trying to hide the fumes. Can I also say I hate the way that this website is formatted? It's mobile formatted, so
Yeah.
the text is fucking tiny. Can we get a teeny bit of zoom here for the people at
I
home?
can do. Sorry, I was scrolling past anyway because the contents of the text isn't really too important at the end of the day.
No, it's
Most
just
of it is
I'm
just
getting
guff.
triggered by the horrendous formatting of this mobile optimized website. It always makes me angry when I see them not using any screen real estate.
As we should all be familiar with now, this is, you know, direct policy under the United Nations for their 2030 agenda, you know, goals number 7, ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable and modern energy for all, which means if you can't afford reliable and sustainable modern energy, you're just going to die. It's like a new
Yeah,
it's the new sort of technological age.
well, it's the way it's phrased. It's modern energy, which means centralized grids, which
Mm.
means, as we've seen with the California generator ban and things like that, it's all one and the same. It removes the independence of energy source from these communities. They can no longer have like butane tanks or oil burners
Mm.
or any of that kind of local generational stuff that is pretty independent. It's pretty self-reliant. This really is a war on African homesteading.
Mm.
It's going to end up with massive pushes into urbanization and then ghettoization. It's going to completely
The report time, that's just a graph.
the traditional fuel sources. It's like in the UK, you can't burn wood. You get fined for having wood burners here now.
Mm.
And it's the same. It's becoming uniform. It really is. It's a war on homesteading. And in Africa, that's still relatively common. It's one of the, South Asia, some places, a few places in the Middle East, maybe, but Africa really is the kind of the last frontier for homesteading. And this is a very, very targeted and powerful attack on that last frontier. They're trying to bring them into the fold of these centralized energy grids. The idea that if they burn fuels independent from the eco grid, they will destroy the planet. And that includes them, cutting down the trees that they grew themselves and cooking in the open. In
Mm.
fact, there was a huge, like in India, a huge push against traditional ovens and cooking in the open and things like that. As a kind of a civilizing method. This was quite a few years ago, but
Yeah.
really, again, it makes them reliant on electricity. It makes them
Well,
reliant
I just
on.
think we should consider really two of the sort of stats off this just for sort of rough like back of the fag paper math when we look at the divestment schemes, which I think is another part of this that people might have skipped over what was really going on. You've got, as it says here, 679 million, or sorry, 733 million people estimated as of 2020 have no consistent electricity. 2.4 billion people, a third of the people in the world, still use inefficient and polluting cooking methods. So we go to this is part of UNEP, which is UN environmental something or other, but it's part of the whole UN thing, because you'll notice the colour scheme's the same on this. And we go
Yes.
part to their air pollution section. And they go on to talk about, global new investment in renewable power and fuels reached an estimated USD 366 billion in 2021, a record high despite impact from the COVID-19 pandemic. And at the bottom here, the divestment trend in 2021 with more than 1,400 institutional investors and institutions worth more than USD 39 trillion and assets committing to partially or fully divesting from fossil fuels. So how's that going to work for those 2.4 billion people that don't have like a gas network that can supply natural gas or electricity from, some sort of eco-friendly source like a hydroelectric station or something like that? Where do those people go? Because the natural gas plant, the coal plant is just pulled out.
Yeah, what happens if you remove people's inability to light fires to cook with? You destroy that knowledge generationally, and then you abandon them, having made them into these creatures of learned helplessness. Like, what happens then? It's it seems altruistic, but when you think about it, it's like, wait a minute, they're taking away the traditional means of cooking for people who live in these provincial hands-to-mouth communities, and they're doing so under the guise of climate change, when it's just somebody creating a campfire to cook a piece of meat on. Like, that's the level, that's the granular level of stuff that is no longer allowed. You're no longer allowed to live off the land and burn the wood on the land that you live off. And that
Well,
is the
yeah,
reality.
no, JD's saying in chat, I know it carries baggage, but this does scream population control and cull. No, it makes total sense. It's, you've given these people enough dependency on, as you say, electricity, clean running water, some form of basic gas fuel that's maybe a bit dirty, but can be used indoor in a way that a fire can't. Then, having three, as you say, 2 or 3 generations of people live through that, lose all the skills they needed to live off their land anyway, and then turn around and say, well, no, you can't do that anymore. You need a wind turbine. And they're going, wind turbine? What's that?
Yeah. Solar panels. Oh yeah, you're gonna run your village off solar panels. It's like all of these solar power station projects have utterly failed, especially the ones in Africa. They've all been absolute embarrassments. So has a lot of the attempted wind power over there. The hydroelectric projects generally underdeliver and create massive water shortage problems downriver because of how long Africa's rivers are. Damming tributaries to like Lake Victoria and places like that is horrendously dangerous and irresponsible if you want to talk about ecological disasters. So it's interesting to see them really, really pushing. I'd like to see more on like the local climate police stuff you talked about, though, like people going around Rwandan villages and telling people they can't burn wood anymore.
No, I can honestly swear there might even be a Vice number that sort of talks about stuff like that. I'm just trying to remember if there's the section on divestment. There we go.
By the way, the divestment stuff is the sharp end of the ESG stuff. Divestment is led by low ESG score. What happens is that they're talking about all these responsible companies, and what's really happening is that a few centralized agencies are effectively down-rating the credit rating of certain bonds and stocks and companies because they don't have the correct ESG score, and then the rest of them are just following what is supposed to be like market safety stuff.
What do you think the correlation of that 1,485 institutions is with the top 1,485 institutions with the highest sort of net value in the Western world?
If you look at, again, we get back to BlackRock and people like that who handle these index funds and handle these, investor relation stuff on behalf of the index fund owners. They are the people who are able to do this. They are the ones who pull the strings, and it has a massive snowball effect. If you're able to bring 10 or 20% of the economy with you, like someone like BlackRock can, the rest will generally try and follow suit, because then it becomes standard practice.
We look as well as our grassroots actors here. Harvard University pledged to pull its USD 41.9 billion endowment from any company that explores or develops fossil fuels. It's a lot of money for a university to have. The bank Postal in France committed to divest its 894 billion in assets from companies by 2030. The Ford Foundation, what the Ford Foundation? You're a car manufacturer. What do you mean? And then they talk about COP26, China.
Well, you know what the Ford Foundation is, don't you?
No, I know. China's involvement in this. Another partnership announced in the lead up to Glasgow. The governments of Indonesia and Philippines joined the Asian Development Bank to establish a mechanism that will use blended finance to accelerate the retirement of new coal power plants and develop renewable energy to replace it.
Asia Development Bank, by the way, is the largest creditor to Sri Lanka.
Hmm.
Just to link that in.
In addition, Durban became South Africa's second city to commit to divestment, pulling 130 million from its 2 pension funds out of fossil fuels. I wonder why they'd be having riots in South Africa just now about high energy prices. Can't be anything to do with that.
Oh God, they've even, if you go to page 117 in here, they've got like the horrible solar patchwork stuff,
Oh, God.
like the destruction of the countryside, just
Let me go have a look at
blanketing it,
that.
like the China solar panel, like the stuff that people like, this doesn't really happen, this is a lie, and it's just, they've just got it front and center there.
What
Like
page is this, sorry?
177 of
Oh,
the full
177,
report.
sorry.
Yeah. Look at that image. It's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah, that's so... nature.
Look at the land impact of that, and imagine that compared to, say, a coal-fired power
Can
station.
you imagine the amount of crap they had to pull out a mine to build all that? Because that's the
There
irony
is-
about it as well, is that you obviously can't use coal and gas and all sorts of stuff in these third world countries, but you can if you're running a mine, pulling battery materials out of the ground for government
Well,
subsidized Teslas.
that's what the thumbnail is.
Yeah.
I put the Tesla in there because the thumbnail is actually people, children working in a cobalt and lithium mine. Sorry, we also missed a donation here from JD, who asked you, did the Mises crew fed post after a few drinks?
No comments.
What happens at Mises stays at Mises, I'm afraid, JD.
Yes. But no, there is, I mean, this is some of the graphs that are in the lecture I linked. It says the global death rate from air pollution per 100,000. And
That's tiny. What is this, a graph?
no. Yeah, look at this graph. You know, I don't know, it just puts into perspective, where this problem is clearly concentrated, and that you look at the world, it's an average rough kind of split between these two to some extent, with this sort of roughly decreasing along, where this one's roughly the same sort of size from end to end. There's a decrease here. However, what that decrease is actually a concentration, because in somewhere like America, completely not a problem, but Haiti, it's, the problem's never really gone away. Because they just, Haiti is one of those countries that really, after their whole big series of earthquakes and hurricanes, never really repaired, get raped by the Clintons, and then are now living under like UN policy that means they can't have gas burners in their house.
I think your signal went crap for a second there, but it seems to be back now. No, you're fine. You just roboted for a sec there.
Fair enough.
That's fine. No, I think there was a slight jitter, but we seem to be okay. But yeah, you're right. They don't tend to have like indoor like wood burners. Well, they do in some places, but there's not like a lot of indoor pollutional stuff like we're talking about here in America.
Hmm. How much? I'm not too sure what he's asking in chat there. How much TBI meddling is involved here?
I'm not sure what TBI is.
Yeah. But there is some interesting tie-ins to this, though, because not only are basic people choking themselves to death in the third world, cooking in ways that they shouldn't be, there seems to have been a constant policy in regards also to geopolitical interests when it comes to LPG stuff. Tony Blair Institute meddling. Probably, I could have had a further look, but by the time I'd grabbed all these sources, I thought we kind of had enough stuff anyway. But
Yeah.
I did put some stuff on the Telegram the other day about Tony Blair Institute in Sri Lanka. We did mention his involvement there, and it's probably very much the same case if you were to look at some of these countries. I don't know, maybe we'll word search through some of the end articles and see if there's any reference to Tony Blair.
Well, I don't think there will be. I've not seen any yet, but there might well be.
But I find this interesting. This one from, I was just looking up, like EU sanctions LPG, and it's some Reuters article from 2012 about them basically sanctioning against Iranian natural gas. And I just thought, well, as maybe there is, something grander to some of these eco policies whereby they're putting sanction on products that maybe come out of Russia and Russia allied states, or Chinese and
Yes.
Chinese allied states.
No, that's very common, and that
Hmm.
is true. This the a lot of the eco stuff does have a very, it's very overt now with Leeb and Putler, but
Hmm.
it was kind of rumbling behind the scenes of energy independence, when really all that happens with the green initiatives, even here in the quote unquote the West, where we're supposed to be extremely advanced, we're supposed to have the best technology in the world, we're supposed to be this mega civilization, and yet we can't make it work.
Hmm.
Like the Germans tried to do the whole wind and solar thing, and it completely fell on its arse, having to recommission coal plants
Hmm.
because they don't have enough electricity for their grids. They're going to have rolling blackouts in the winter. They're already basically turning off people's heating in like social housing. Spain's basically turned off all the air conditioning in public buildings. It's got ridiculous.
I would say this is also one to send to people who tell you the EU doesn't have any power, because they're basically here bullying the South Korean government into no longer buying Iranian LPG gas. And the South Korean sort of spokesperson has been like, well, if that's the call, then that's what it will be. And then we get on to talk about the supply crunch. Was that like the transition from credit crunch to supply crisis, was like supply crunch?
Yes. There's a lot of this stuff about, supply crunch, supply crisis, supply chain, all of it. There's a lot of excuse making about the failure of this magical technology to deliver, but the results are amplified when it comes to, what regards to the third world.
There's almost like the guy on the bike with a stick meme going on here. Another
Yeah, there
unintended
is.
consequence is that sanctions are likely to push up Europeans' energy bills as winter nears. Europe is likely to find itself struggling for suppliers of yet another winter fuel if buyers in South Korea and elsewhere try to make up for their loss of Iranian LPG on the open market. Stupid Koreans, stupid Koreans.
Basically, yeah.
Uh,
Well, the big issue with all the sanction stuff is it becomes self-defeating. You end up with two energy markets as people have stopped caring as much. It seems like there's that very famous image of most of the world isn't taking part in this, so they end up with actually lower gas prices and are able to, if they're not buying into a lot of this stuff, which a lot of the time they seem to be being forced to by the UN to
Yeah.
partake in other programs. But if you're not buying into it, your industry is going gangbusters now. You can create things cheaper than everyone else. Like China especially is probably having, that they're having a lot of other trouble internally, but they're certainly not having an energy crisis.
Like, it carries on though, because this is from September of last year. Poor countries push for leniency in banning fossil fuel financing, which is basically just a direct result of the divestment program we were looking at earlier.
Well, divestment really is a precursor to de-industrialization and demobilization. You pull the money rug out from under all of these, what we regard as underdeveloped countries, and you try and make them strive for this magical future ecotech that doesn't exist yet. But they aren't able to cushion the blow, because really most of our energy still comes from all these fossil fuel sources, and the 30 to 40% really is just like the slack in the system. What's happening really is that as we add all this green energy that doesn't deliver, we're taking the slack out of the system, we're taking out the spare capacity and pretending that that's filled in by the green energy, when it just never actually delivers when it's asked to by the grid.
It's kind of funny here though, because they start naming names a little bit. Governments and development banks and funded by wealthy nations, including the United States and World Bank, largely control access to financing for the world's 74 poorest countries as defined by the World Bank. The World Bank announced similar restrictions. This is in relation to, the Treasury Department in August issued guidance to the world's multilateral banks that opposes funding entirely to oil and coal and production of natural gas. It will offer narrow and qualified support for certain natural gas infrastructure like pipelines in the poorest countries only. The European Investment Bank has taken the strictest approach it announced in 2019. It would end financing of all fossil fuel projects, including natural gas, by the end of this year. Gas facilities that have technology installed that could capture its emissions are the only exception. I'm sure they've got loads of that in the third world.
Well, there's a huge amount of that stuff in very specific areas. Like China pretends to do a lot of it. There's a lot of very expensive projects for that in the US, but the whole carbon capture stuff is really just a scam. It's a laughing stock.
Well,
It's a lot like the carbon credits as well. The
yeah.
offsetting.
Oh, I mean, one of the examples Terrell had in his lecture is a quote from one of the ministers of government in Ghana somewhere, and he was essentially saying the fact that, well, in like 2005, we used to export energy, and now we are at a point where we have to import energy. Now, obviously, some part of that might be the fact that they have mobilized in a way that their gas capacity or their sort of energy capacity couldn't make up for, but I doubt it would be that drastic. And I think that something like this kind of policy where they'd be getting rid of the sort of methods of energy production they'd be rely on probably has a much greater effect.
Well, yeah, it will do. Well, you can never really tell, but you think as they mobilize, they'll be able to mobilize more power production. That generally is what happens when you become a more developed economy. That you're able to meet your energy needs better, and if anything, they'd have a greater surplus. Either they have industrialized deliberately and competently, or they have been hamstrung by a lot of this regulation. And to explain what's been glossed over there is that the World Bank and the EU Bank, they're telling a lot of their third-party lenders. What happens is, if you lend to these countries and if you lend to fossil fuel providers, it's not the fact that you are left out of the initiatives. You are basically blacklisted. Your ESG scores go down. You no longer receive the finance. The central bank's no longer investing you because you become a conduit for their money. So it's not just like, well, all these NGOs and all these governments are purely choosing through their market power to not invest in green energy. That's not what it is at all. What they're doing is they're cartelizing and telling anyone who doesn't want to go along with this divestment program and this deindustrialization that they will be completely locked out of the financial system if they don't play ball. That's why that's ultimately why they have to go along with it, and that's why them saying, "Oh, all these companies have agreed to divest" is horseshit. They've been threatened with a big stick. They've been told you will divest or else.
But no,
what else do we have here then?
It seems that this is having a terrible effect, though. That not to woe is the third world, oh those poor sods, but I consider the fact that we rarely see this reported other than in regards to energy crisis, energy protests, but there is no explanation of how the energy crisis or the energy problem came around.
It's purely an emergent phenomenon.
Yeah, purely like the situation in Sri Lanka where they just ran out of food.
Yeah, they're just running out of energy, guys. Africa's like full of coal. It's like overflowing with coal. Yeah, they've run out of energy.
Yeah. And this is I believe directly from is it the vice president of Nigeria or something?
Yes.
Yeah, he's talking about the exact same thing. In April, 7 European countries, including France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, announced that they would halt public funding for certain fossil fuel projects abroad. Little less than 1 year prior, Norway's sovereign wealth fund, the largest in the world, sold out of positions in major mining and energy companies because of environmental concerns. In 2018, Ireland became the first country to pledge to entirely divest from fossil fuels, which doesn't mean we're not going to use petrol anymore. What it means is we're not going to let people in the third world use petrol anymore.
Yes. This one's very damning though, because we had to retrieve this from behind a paywall. But this is from Foreign Affairs, and yeah, it's Yemi Osinbajo, and he was, I think, like the vice president of Nigeria, which is kind of amazing. Yeah, curbing natural gas investment in Africa would do little to limit carbon emissions globally, but much to hurt the continent's economic prospects. Right now, Africa is starved for energy.
This is here. Cool.
Yeah. Excluding South Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa's 1 billion people have the power generation capacity of just 81 gigawatts, far less than the 108 gigawatt capacity of the United Kingdom. basically, and there's a lot of like fig leaves here. There's a lot of appeal to the sensibility of the elite and the green sensibility itself. And it's like, look, there's also a lot of like carbon offsetting, and the narrative, the accepted narrative here is the woe is the third world. We need to help them more. We need to give them more green technology. And what's really going on is that's covering up what is really just a massive either deindustrialization or hamstringing of industrialization part way, which, as you said, is disastrous because you've got them to the stage where they're reliant on certain centralized systems, and then you're pulling the rug out from under them after
Yep.
maybe 30 to 50 years, which is just enough time for them to gain proper dependence. It feels so deliberate.
Well, and in that same time as well, we've been giving them, we've basically been subsidizing their food supply, so they've all been having kids like mad.
Yes.
It's like as you say, we've given them everything they need to flourish, and then as soon as we realize, well, we've developed now, we have lots of people to provide for, we need a more complex division of labor, henceforth we need more machines and more electricity. They've turned around and said, well, even that electricity you're producing now you can't do, so stuff yourselves. And it's, it really does bring to mind the sort of idea of, well, they collapsed the Middle East to ship millions of people here. Are they just doing the same here with Africa? Or, I think I put somewhere in the notes as like the eco whack job calculus, something like, oh, well, if you bring the third worlders here, they'll be more developed than it would take carbon dioxide to develop them where they are.
Well, ultimately, it just is fueled by the suicidal altruism we saw in the wake of the Syrian refugee crisis, in that we created a situation in which there was a humanitarian crisis, and then we used it to fire hose mass immigration into Western Europe. Huge amounts, mass amounts of propaganda, guilt tripping. It was a huge regime project, and I feel that the narrative is going to be partly repeating what we're saying, but in different terms, is, oh, the poor third world, they're suffering because of the climate emergency. And we did this because we're the West and we use all the energy, we burn all the petrol, blah, 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 blah. And it's our responsibility to take these millions of people in. And that really will be it'll make the Syrian refugee crisis like a picnic. There is a huge gearing up here. They've been doing it for a decade. If you look up like climate refugees, just look at the term climate refugees. I've been priming people for so long, and the idea that, oh, sub-Saharan Africa is going to become uninhabitable because of carbon dioxide. When really what's going to happen is they're going to lose their ability to produce power because we've pulled the coal and gas rug from out under them, and they're going to go back to literally being in mud huts, hunting with sticks. And they don't have the know-how to do that anymore. And they have too high a population to do that, and we will cause essentially a Stone Age collapse in sub-Saharan Africa via these initiatives.
Oh, but
and
don't you understand? It's because the supply chains are collapsing.
Yeah.
It's part
yeah. A moth sneezed in Djibouti, and the caterpillar farted in China. So all the cruise ships overturned, and that blocked the Panama Canal, and that means you can't have oil and gas anymore.
Yeah, I see.
It's
Tank Imperator's given us a super chat of 10 whole Canadian dollars. What's that, like 8 pence? Speaking of third world money, so essentially keep the third world poor and start starving to import their people into second class slaves. No, the people importing them are going to give them everything they want or everything they could want and more.
Yes, they'll be used as a vector to create this levelized world, this cultureless, borderless world, in which you have essentially the pod underclass, and then you have the elite layer, and that's kind of it. I mean, they talk about this. I know people like jumping up and down and shouting, about the whole Great Replacement conspiracy, but it's not. You don't even need to go into that. Like, it's very, very simple what's going on here, and they put it in their own boring managerial terms. What they're trying to do is create this both locked down and open world in which you have identical populations of identical economic units everywhere that are easy to manage.
Hmm.
You have these levelized populations. You have a mobile class, essentially a mobile merchant class, and then you have these people in these 15-minute cities who can't travel more than 30 minutes from where they live without running out of carbon credits.
I
And
was
you
gonna say,
mix them all up. You put the world in a giant concrete mixer, and no one knows where they are. No one has a culture. No one has a community, and they're not able to do anything about any of
well,
it.
there's one quick point I want to mention with this as well. There's a couple maybe in the bottom. That, natural gas, as they say, it is used not only for power but for industry and fertilizer. Oh, well, why would they need fertilizer? Fertilizer, how could that become a problem? Oh, wait, and then you think of the whole Sri Lanka situation we were looking at before,
Yes.
where maybe there's the combo going on there as well, where you're divesting both from gas and from not classic, but older style, more chemical fertilizers, which maybe aren't the best for you, but, it's better than no food, possibly.
Well, the thing is, it's like shock treatment.
Hmm.
You can't with a mass population, like a lot of these African countries have developed in the past 50 years. A lot of their population have gone up by 10 times in places. It's ridiculous. That's why you have food crisis, because people have 15 kids and no jobs. That's just like, in that situation, either you get mass food aid or people will starve because you've had too many kids, you idiot. And again, we need to go into it at some point about like the third world kind of charity NGO industrial complex, and how they've essentially created a dependent underclass in many
Yeah.
countries that are completely reliant on Western food aid. Like completely.
Just noticing Ben Gale in chat. I hope I get a red pod. Well, screw you. My pod's gonna
No.
have stripes.
Striped pod. You
That's gonna be my new line. Just when everyone's like arguing about shit. Well, screw you. My pod's gonna have like cool stripes anyway.
Oh no. Even the trans pods have stripes.
Ah.
It's striped like my socks. No. Yeah.
But no, this is more just a lot of the same thing. He's basically talking about the World Bank, massive American banks entirely pulling out of gas and coal projects in Africa and basically leaving the people with essentially no access to energy. Because that's a really clever thing to do.
It's mass shock therapy. If the attempt was genuine, and I in no way think it is, nobody at the apex thinks this is going to bring about some sort of green revolution. They know it's going to create mass human suffering, and that's part of the idea. But doing it in this manner creates the biggest shock possible.
Mm.
By the way, chemical fertilizer is derived from like petroleum products largely.
No, I was somewhat aware.
You can't create ammonia without petroleum products.
Mm.
You can't create industrial fertilizer without petroleum products. You can't create any kind of form of plastic without petroleum products. You can't create most modern chemical processes without petroleum products. It's impossible.
And what, of course, is the best thing of the story? The West already has their boogeyman to blame when the collapse happens. Worst of global energy crisis may still be ahead, IEA says. Security of oil and gas supplies remains a major challenge. China has big-footed world on new energy supply chains. What big-footed? Did they have to use their Ben Bernanke billion-dollar bonkers bazooka revolver or something?
Big-footed. What do they even mean by that? To get much more attention or take control of a situation instead of someone else. Okay. That's a weird phrase, though. I don't get, like, I've never heard that before.
Maybe they'll explain in the course of the article, hopefully.
Maybe, but I'm not familiar with what fucking bigfooting is. Christ.
Yeah, a global squeeze on energy supply that's triggered crippling shortages and sent power and fuel prices surging may get worse, according to the head of the International Energy Agency. The world has never witnessed such a major energy crisis in terms of its depth and complexity. You started it, you fucking prick.
Well, as we've seen here, it's just like, well, mass divestment from oil and gas. Oil and gas energy crisis. It's basically illegal to invest in oil and gas. Mass oil and gas energy crisis.
The whole energy system is in turmoil following the February invasion of Ukraine by Russia, at the time the biggest oil and natural gas exporter and a major player in commodities, Byrol said. Soaring prices are lifting the cost of filling gas tanks, heating homes, and powering industry across the globe, adding to inflationary pressures and leading to deadly protests from Africa to Sri Lanka. Oh my
They've
god,
wrapped it all up with a neat bow, haven't
their
they?
narrative is all there.
It's all there. I mean, yeah, all Russia, all oil and gas comes out of Russia through Ukraine. No one else makes oil and gas. There's no other way to create it, no other way to ship it. uh, it's very we created America. Everything's made of cotton, but but reverse. It's it's amazing. It's that they do this and then they blame you for it.
Look at this as well. Look at the cause and effect fugazi they're playing. Like the oil crises of 1970s, which promoted huge gains in fuel efficiency and a boom in nuclear power. The world may see faster adoption of government policies that speed the transition to cleaner energy.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
yeah, they're just going to adopt these policies. They've not been signaling and telling us barefaced for the last decade that this is what we're going to do.
I mean, the fuel efficiency stuff in the 70s is kind of a lie. There's all kinds of great stuff about how the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit never delivered savings, how the choking of engines by Detroit only created like this false economy in which you have 7-liter engines creating 80 horsepower. The reforms in the 70s for fuel efficiency in America were and still are a joke. And quite rightly were kind of embarrassedly abandoned in a lot of ways. It's always like, wow, ooh, technology developed. It's like, well, it developed many years later. What really happened is what really happened was the Malaise era, and you ended up with horrendous cars for a decade, and people like a miserable decade of the 70s in America that people want to forget about. That's what you have. You just have misery.
The fallout for the global energy sector as the US and allies. Are we already at the war narrative that heavy?
Yeah.
We're the allies. Challenge President Butler over the war in Ukraine, where he seeks to instantiate evil Natsdom over everyone or something. And seek alternatives to Russian exports have highlighted the need to reduce dependence on fossil fuels. Can't we? Venezuela, are they not full of it? North Sea. Oh no, you can't pull it out of the North Sea because you get taxed to death. Well, you can't pull it out of Venezuela because the American government's basically playing, fanning about until the right time is there to overthrow whatever government's standing at that time. Well, you can't get it from the Middle East. There's a war on.
Place. Yeah, the only person hated in Ukraine, sorry, not Ukraine, in Venezuela more than Maduro is like the CIA puppet fake opposition.
Because it's like, why are you not doing anything?
Maybe we should have Caleb on at some point to have some sort of Venezuela special.
Yeah.
But we can talk about that, about like the horrible fake CIA opposition that's basically hamstrung any possibility of genuine opposition
of course,
to Maduro.
Rob's got it right. We have always been at war with Russia.
Yes.
Yeah, here's that line again. China has big-footed a lot of the technology and supply chains, and that could end up making us vulnerable if we don't develop our own supply chains. So we're going to collapse the third world so they can't build the One Belt, One Road.
We went over last time about how One Belt, One Road has essentially failed, and how the Chinese have been largely outflanked by people like the IMF, the World Bank, and especially all this ESG shit, in that they can't get other people or these countries to invest in their oil and gas stuff. Or what's happening is they're taking the money in the short term, then running off back to the West. That is a complete false narrative. China really here is a scapegoat and will continue to be a scapegoat. They haven't done this. They haven't created this. The One Belt One Road hasn't been completed, and a lot of the countries that signed up to it have had the investment completely tail off over the past few years. We went over the graph. The investment peaked in something like 2014 and has reduced basically every year since. This isn't happening. This is just a barefaced lie for people who do not understand what's happening with China.
Yeah, pretty much.
ESG are not eggs. Thank you, Chad. Yeah, developments including the US restricting imports of products from China's Zhejiang region, and a long-discussed tax in Europe on the import of goods made with high carbon energy could help diversify the solar power chain by creating openings for manufacturers such as India. Martin Green, a professor at the University of New South Wales, said at a conference. That's just like that's weird, like like the Indian Brahmin class and their underlings are going to build us all these magical solar panels, and we're going to completely layer the countryside with them. And for 5 years, we might meet 30% of our energy needs, and then they'll become 80% less efficient. it's I get what all this depends on is you being ignorant of both geopolitics and like basic thermodynamics and
I
how
see.
energy
That's the
creation
stuff
works.
I find hilarious. Is like, is there no one out there that's just any sort of like person that studies systems in regards to energy input and output that's sitting crunching the numbers for all this stuff? There's got to be.
It's basically illegal. You'll essentially get thrown out of university for trying to do that kind of stuff. It's like doing like the race intelligence stuff. It's that frowned upon, and I'm not kidding. Like you'll get accused of being like an oil industry patsy, or you'll get told that you're not,
the conspiracy
from
theory that is thermodynamics.
yeah. Well, a lot of what they do is they do what's referred to in engineering as future tech. It's something you should never do, in which your projections for creation rely on future tech. It relies on this unrealized technology which may never be realized. And that's all of what the green energy stuff is. All of it is future tech. All of it is, well, in 10 years' time, solar panels will be 80% more efficient. But they never factor in the unreliability and you never get out. The wind farms are a perfect example of this. You never get out of wind farms what is projected. What is projected is deliberately over optimistic to fudge the equations to make it look like they work. And the fundamental truth, I ended up explaining this at length. God, this was like 6 years ago now, to like one of those Greenpeace people on the street. Like I actually stood for like half an hour and conversed with them, and by the end of it, they just kind of wandered around looking disheveled and looking downbeaten because they didn't quite they couldn't quite deny what I was saying, but they also couldn't quite acknowledge it, so they just kind of froze.
That's why, just as you have witnessed, I just shout at them.
Yeah, you should do. No, I won't. You just scream. No, I will not eat the bugs at them. And you hope you're like the 7th person to do that today, and they like go home and reconsider their life choices.
Yeah, why do people keep telling me that I'm gonna make them eat bugs?
Yeah, what is this? Accidentally radicalizing people in like 5 years' time, putting them on the pipeline, just ruining people's lives by accident. But that, yeah, it's the fact that they don't understand that in order to create it, you need to factor in all the transport, all the creation. It's as autistic as you need to factor in a certain percentage of the clothes that a lorry driver's wearing and things like that, because it's a closed system. So there's lots of stuff you don't consider, but all of that takes energy to create. So you have to factor in the entire supply chain, which none of this does. I remember when I was doing my engineering qualifications and my HND, then my degree equivalent stuff, and I was talking to the tutors there, and they were saying that they've encountered people who were these environmental engineering students, and it's like we taught him wrong as a joke, that meme. They have actually been taught to do energy equations and look at supply chains wrong, because if you look at it in the right way, none of it makes sense. Because the energy put in to create these solar panels and the energy taken that's needed to dispose of them, if you add those two things together, it doesn't come up to the lifetime amount of output that they have.
Yeah, but it puts
even
like
raw at source.
cool
Never mind
$15
transmission.
million in Barack Obama's back pocket. So
Yeah. Like once you take transmission losses into account, it's nowhere near. And again, that's something that most people just don't think about, in that where it is windy is usually nowhere near where people want to live. You can build coal-fired power plants relatively close to population centers, but you are hamstrung with where you can put wind farms, and you get massive transmission losses because of that. It's so simple. and yet it's something that is not factored in, because if it was factored in, these projects would be scrapped at the planning stage.
Well, the one I've always enjoyed explaining to people is that, like, right, well, if you have a system that runs on hydroelectric, on geothermal, but how do you take power out of the grid when you've got a surplus? How do you spin turbines backwards to take wattage, like some level of wattage out of the system, as is required on an electrical grid?
Yeah. What happens if it's too windy one day and you can't lock the turbines without breaking them? Like, how do you shut down and balance these systems? How do you stop the voltages getting too high, and destroying this? Like, they can't answer that. Like, you can't balance these systems because they're not on-demand energy. And usually, again, it's future tech. They hand wave it away and say they're going to have massive banks of Tesla batteries, or they're going to have some sort of, these hilarious mechanical batteries they're talking about, that basically don't exist. The weird spinny bearing vacuum batteries
Yeah, I'm trying to
that are
find.
literally just a spinning top and a can.
Someone mentioned in chat, why not just build nuclear plants? Well, this is something we've actually discussed a little bit. There's nobody left to build them anymore.
I can handle this question. Having been involved in the creation of nuclear power plants, because I have been involved in some of the mechanical services that go in them, the planning stages of them alone can take a decade, because it's a hot potato. It's a NIMBY hot potato. Nobody wants to plan them. There's supposed to be nuclear power plants that are being delivered in the UK by 2030, and yet the planning permission hasn't been given for them yet. Ground hasn't broken on them, and they're supposed to be completed in 8 years' time, which is, for a modern nuclear power plant, quite optimistic. It takes so long for most of these projects to come to fruition that a lot of them have already collapsed. A lot of them have already been scrapped, and yet they're still on paper as these things that's supposed to be coming in the future. We haven't managed to commission a new nuclear power plant in this country for 40 years, I think. Or if not, the amount that have opened have not matched the amount that have closed for an exception for about that time. We've not managed to actually up the number of working nuclear power plants.
See, I wonder as well. There's the whole, I saw A and D were talking about it on Twitter, but the government's £70 billion, energy green reinvestment scheme and stuff like that. Is that 70 billion either just a way to say that actually we're doing all the divestment stuff that the UN is requiring us to do? So we're actually taking 70 billion that's actually somewhat safe in organizations like Shell or BP and move it into like green scam stuff? Or is that just an excuse to write a blank check for this?
I'll put this graph in the general chat for the nuclear stuff. I want to reiterate this. This is from 2018, and a lot of those have already been cancelled. If you look at the operating number there, by 2030 we will have fewer operating existing plants than we did in 1965, and the in construction and planned ones are nowhere near. They are not going to be delivered. They are so far away from delivery, I reckon, that most of them will be killed off because they are already over budget. So that is the situation of nuclear power.
I was trying to look through here what their specific time window actually is. Yeah, under the government's new plan, so this will be related to that 70 billion. And so it is really just it's probably divestment funds totted up on some fancy accounting and a blank check for this stuff. Plan to produce up to 50 gigawatts of energy through offshore wind farms. What? You're gonna make the earth spin backwards with that many fans? Who's doing the maths for this stuff? Is that why they're like the negatively discriminate against Asians nowadays? Because if they actually got them in to do some form of energy equations for this stuff, they go, it no work.
Well, a lot of them won't speak up. They generally get like the weird, like passive street sweeper classes to do that kind of stuff. Which article is this again, by the way?
It was just the first one that came up when I looked up. I'll put it in the Discord.
I do. I'm trying to read along here. I put one again for the nuclear stuff. There's a Reuters article here. We can talk about it in a little bit, but it's it's already 3 billion over budget, just one of the projects, and or delayed another year.
Hmm.
Yeah, they're gonna build 8 nuclear reactors by 2035, but who the fuck is gonna build them?
You're gonna build
Like,
2 at Sizewell as well. How many houses are you gonna have to knock down to do that? How much just a lovely English land in Suffolk has been flattened to build some horrible big cooling towers? I can't believe the 50 gigawatts from offshore power though.
that's not possible. Like I said, it isn't feasible.
Yeah, there will be a
Uh,
£30 million heat pump investment accelerator competition to make British heat pumps which reduce demand for gas. Your house will no
Mm.
longer be able to be tapped into the gas supply. That's what you're telling us there. And then somebody's just going to fiddle 30 million quid into their pocket.
Brit pumps for Brits by Brits.
It's a bit cold, but I do love me Brit pump.
They're just not gonna work. I don't like air source heat pumps aren't the most efficient things. A lot of people greet them as some kind of miracle, but they're not. And where's the electricity going to come from to power them? You know, gas gets burnt, but you don't lose gas in the pipes.
Mm.
Or at least if you're doing it right, you lose electricity in the cables. Again, this is bad energy equations. It's done at source. They're not factoring in transmission losses when they talk about how much more efficient heat pumps are. And they don't work.
Mm.
You have to have a much larger array than you could fit on most small British homes, especially in British
I'm surprised they even
flats.
list Hunterston on this one. Hunterston's tiny.
Hunterston, like most of these, are also just not operating
Well,
properly.
that's what they say. Decommissioned site.
Well,
So they're
even
trying
the
to
ones
say,
that aren't.
yeah, I was gonna say they're trying to say Torness, Hartlepool, Heysham, and Hinkley Point and stuff that are still working.
Barely.
Yeah.
No, and basically all of them are going to be decommissioned by this magical 2035. And we're going to have this magical new nuclear power, which, by the way, will only meet the output we saw in 2020.
Oh yeah.
Going to have a massive decline in the meantime. And yeah, by the way, they're all £3 billion over budget and massively delayed, and probably going to get scrapped because we don't have the expertise to make them work. And the French don't either. The French have had trouble with their own projects. They're
There's
trying to help us.
Rhetoric's master. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer criticised the strategy as too little and too late.
Wow.
Oh, you see, you didn't stop the bullet before it came out the gun. It's too little, too late.
It's
See,
like I said.
there is a great way that's described in a lot of the sort of Austrian economic stuff when it comes to like monetary policy that every time they inject horrendous amounts of money into the economy and lower the interest rates, they always say, well, it's just that we didn't do it enough. And they always say it's like a doctor giving you a poison, thinking it's going to heal you. And the thing he considers is not the fact that it's the poison he's given you that's killed you, it's that he didn't give you enough. If he gave you twice as much, you'd be okay. And it's the same crap here. It's like, well, we just need more, even though it's very clearly not helping.
No, I'm just, again, that they're really, really hinging on this nuclear aspect. It's like their Hail Mary. None of it, they're tacitly are missing that none of it works without it. But yeah, they're just saying we need more. We need to have more green energy. We didn't go green hard enough.
From Richard Krug in chat. Have you made the turbine spin the other way? Would it reverse the polarity and make people's hair dryers suck their hair up? Your Hoover starts blowing crap everywhere.
Oh no, they're moving the turbines backwards again. That's not how it works, but it should work that way. That's like cartoon world logic. I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just find this whole sort of the connection between all these things interesting. There is basically a movement to de-invest both in the West and outside of it from energy sources that actually somewhat work, at least for the time being. So, what's the plan here? It really does get to that point where, like, are we just heading for the collapse then? Is that it? I mean, it's just taking their
Probably.
sweet time.
Like I said, I can personally debunk the nuclear energy angle on this. That they're not like the idea that they're going to build 8 nuclear reactors in 8 years.
No,
They're
no,
going to
reach
build. They're
my
going
Reuters
to
article
build a
limit, but
new.
we get the idea.
Oh, God,
Launch
they're going to
delayed by
build.
another year to June 2027, costing $3 billion. But developers warn there could be further delays. It'll be like the bloody Scottish Parliament build.
Yep, and it'll have to be knocked down in a year. Like I said, from what I can tell, even if these reactors are completed, they might not be fit for purpose. We just do not have the expertise to build nuclear reactors anymore.
No.
And building them is such a headache now that it's basically unfeasible. I think the Ukraine has more nuclear output than we do still.
But aren't they a war zone?
That's
Haven't the Russians
what makes
taken all the nuclear waste and turned them into dirty bombs?
oh God, all the stuff about like the European Energy Commission saying that they're going to cause another Chernobyl because they can't go and inspect an active war zone is funny. It's just like, let us in to inspect. It's like, sir, this is a war zone. Yeah, it's the same shitty reactor you looked at last time. Well done. I don't know. I just don't. I don't know how they're gonna pull this trick off because we're just gonna run out.
I see. What is a Ukrainian nuclear reactor anyway? A couple of forks and a microwave.
Well, Chernobyl, the 3 remaining ones still operate. They're modified RKBMs, so. Oy vey, it's another Chernobyl. Yeah, I think I made that joke on Twitter before I got banned from it last time. Another Chernobyl. But I can't see how they think this is going to work. Like, unless they actually do like the FEMA camps and start like shooting people and do like the actual Georgia Guidestone style complete population collapse and they disappear off into their bunkers and let us fight it out in the wilderness. I don't see where else this is going because they smelled their farts enough that they think this is going to work? Do they really think we can all drive Teslas powered by wind farms?
I mean,
Like,
surely not. They can't be that thick.
But a lot of these people like 2nd, 3rd generation technocrats, and the upper mid-level definitely are.
But I suppose most of those people probably lived in such cosmopolitan paradises that they get to live the bugman life. So they don't really care. They already think they're living it, despite the fact that they're probably consuming a horrendous amount of energy to engage in roundabout processes that there's no need for them to exist. Absolutely.
They move paper from one desk to another and get paid like $100,000 a year for it.
Yep, and everything's convenience delivered. Nothing is locally sourced. All the food is shit. It's basically America.
Yeah. Ah, dear. Is there anything we've not covered yet before we move on to a bit more of an open discussion about some stuff?
No, I think we've got through everything, really. I don't want to have loads and loads of stuff anyway. I sort of thought I'd quickly look up some things on it and we'll not belabor the point because I think there's enough there that people can tie it together. They're not stupid. They're here.
Shall we move on to a little bit more of the Mises U recap then? Because you've got a few more photos to show, don't you?
I mean, I suppose I can, yes. I think I've got... I mean, there's just another one of me by the...
You by the sign.
Yeah.
We can go over some of that stuff. But, so what was your highlight of the week then?
I don't know. I mean, I would say to people that my highlight sort of thing is maybe something that I can't quite talk about directly at the moment for the sake of keeping it a secret.
Oh, okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
We may have the opportunity to do something I think quite special, and it's something that there isn't much of in Europe anymore. And as we have discussed, as we've done things, I will say with Nomos, that if given half the chance at it, will probably try and basically knock it out of the park and, you know, do something worthwhile that hopefully can carry on as a bit of a tradition. At least I would like to think so.
Yes.
Anyway, obligatory sign picture, which my mum of all people had asked for.
Oh, the signed picture. It's a good picture. You look a bit awkward in that picture though.
It was so hot that day. And like, it doesn't look it because it doesn't look sunny, but it was honestly, it had to be like 37 or 38 and like top 90% humidity because it.
You look like someone's like your uncle's behind the camera or something. And you're like, come on, we have to get the shot. We came all this way.
Well, no, because the guy taking the picture was standing in the road. Because it's like a weird spot because the pavement's quite thin. No, what Ben was saying, meeting Yez was quite good. So was meeting Pete. As I'm saying, there were so many people I met though. It's like I would have to then rattle them all off because then I would feel unfair by not mentioning people.
Oh, speaking of that, I don't know if they're gonna do it or not, but Molebug was looking for people to hang around with before, because he's gonna be in London for a couple of days before Shieldings, and we're gonna try and see if we can get him to come to a weave, the bug weave. That could be funny.
I did also take part in their, like what they call it, elevator pitch sort of thing.
Yes.
And you've got a minute to basically convince someone about Austrian economics. And I said some whole thing about, do you want to, why is Austrian economics important? It's important if you wish to deconstruct the economic and political maya that is the illusion painted by our elites and other such lines related to this. And it was described as Alex Jonesian. So I'll take that.
Exceptionally big compliment.
From Phil Bishop of all people, mind. It's also the blue wall. I made it.
It is. Oh, that is you on the blue wall. Yeah, it's the blue Mises wall.
I don't know how many times during the week I said to people, even people that work there, like, for years for me, it's just been the place where the funny men in suits that I did like a wee dance. the funny men in suits give speeches in front of the blue screen, and they were like, yeah, fair enough.
That's the only angle you really see. 'Cause it's funny. You have like a lack of context, which is quite familiar to people who've seen bits of places but never whole places.
Yeah.
God, I'm trying to think of examples, but I can't think of one.
No, I would. I don't know. I would really like to go again at some point. It's something I'll definitely consider in future. Even just going to another Mises U again. Just why not? I mean, I was lucky enough to pass their oral exam on my first go, which I was told I should be rather proud of. And well, I don't know. I'll go back next time and have a go at their prize money for
it. I'm here for the Mises is lost gold.
A high roller.
The lost gold of Mises. Oh dear.
Mesopotamia.
That's funny. But on the green imperialism thing, it's just.
Tell you what, I'll grab some.
It's a wider part of the same chapter.
It
very much links in with our previous green capital stream.
Yes.
One feeds the other very, very much so. But it's, hopefully this has given you guys some tools to be able to go to people and go, look, the divestment is what is causing the energy crisis, not anything else. The idea that this, the inflation and the energy crisis sprung fully formed when Putler, crossed the border into sacred big chungus Reddit land.
Yeah, he bombed Disneyland.
Yeah, he bombed big chungus land, and all the Reddit heroes got their Reddit gold stolen.
Oh no! Big
and
Putler stole all the Reddit gold. How are they going to get it back?
The great Putler Reddit gold heist. Very.
I see. We do also have a whole big stack of new reading material as well.
Yes.
People should expect to see and stuff. I'm very interested. I've mentioned it already. This Intervention and Revolution by Richard J. Barnett has some very interesting stuff on it by the looks.
I wonder if next year they'll have the populist delusion in there.
You never know. I've also got obligatory pictures of Rothbard's bookshelf, which is very based.
Oh, we should talk about, you brought home the most libertarian thing that has ever existed.
Oh yeah, the Rothbard silver coin.
Yeah, you have like a Rothbard like silver sovereign coin. It's hilarious. It is like peak libertarian. Oh, you also found oh, it's funny because get one over on Pete here. Pete was talking on Dave Smith's podcast about the fact that he hadn't seen any Mosca in Rothbard's library. There it is.
Yep, right next to
Yep.
Mosley, where it belongs.
Breaking news. Yeah, they apparently some of his notes on Mosley are very interesting, but
yeah, I don't know. I have a couple of like shelves I took pictures of. There's just the House of Morgan, Churchill, the End of Glory, America's Greatest Depression. There's just so much great stuff he's got. The Russian Revolution, Ukraine.
Attach it to a chain and wear it like a medallion. It's a funny comment. There's so much good stuff there, though.
Yeah, no, it is. I don't know, it's a shame you don't get more time because there is just so much stuff in that collection of books that I would be desperate to plow through all of it, but you would just never have the time.
No, that is like a life's worth of reading in there. And it makes you realize that a lot of that might have been later life reading, because he did spend a little bit of time retooling in the 80s with like the Reagan route and all that, and re-emerged as like glowing eyes Rothbard in the 90s, as we talked about.
Yeah.
He comes back and writes stuff like Program for the Populist Right, in which he basically says, the agorism is going out there and killing homeless people.
I'm gonna see if I can
he just comes back as like Sam Francis reviewing Rothbard.
Neil Francis.
He comes back as Neil Francis with his time. Yeah, Neil Francis and Neil Rothbard with the time machine. God, only a few people understand this. If you don't understand that, go and watch our video about Sam Francis and our video with Phil Bishop, where we go over the article in which he reviews Beautiful Losers. Which is very interesting.
I've opened it as a separate image, but this is one that I put in the Telegram from Rothbard's copy of Oswald, Assassin or Fall Guy. And you can just see, like, he's just as full of scribblings, like, I tend to the belief of a conspiracy of powerful men with a narrow circle of complicity in the middle echelons of the FBI and the Dallas police. Agree!
That's great. So he was woke on the lone gunman question, which makes him very X-Files pilled. Oh, dear. It's all pretty excellent though. I'm glad you got to go. Who again, the original lecture that we kind of nixed a bit the idea from, if you're watching this on VOD, is down below, so do go and watch that. And I might link a couple of our other videos because of what we talked about as well. The stream with Phil Bishop we did is very slightly fed posty titled "The Writers of the Next American Revolution," which I thought was a great title.
One last image up as well. It's the one of Yes, Turnip and myself. And
yes, but I imagine I'd like to meet Pete and Yiz as well. We'll have to go back there ourselves because I've met quite a few people I know in the US, but they're most of the people I know from Maya's Twitter and places like that.
I decided to file the sign and sit on it.
Oh no, she sat on this. She sat on the sign. How could you? Was it comfy?
Not particularly. No, it was also very hot.
Okay, we've got actual reports and breaking news here. Misa's sign, not comfy, quite warm. Also smaller than expected.
Yeah, no, it is because
they always photograph it from a low angle.
Yeah,
and it looks like it's like 50 feet tall.
It's really not. It's very small.
Troll with a purpose. Left anarchists complain about lack of agorism, yet very rarely engage in it. Curious. Agorism's fucking cope anyway.
What does Konkin have to say about this?
I always imagine Konkin as like a conker. He's like a conker person. But that's just me being silly. Anyway, I think we've officially run out of material here. A bit of a quicker stream today, but we didn't want to belabor the point too much. We had a specific one to go over, and I guess it's easing back in after Mises U and a very, very busy couple of weeks.
Indeed. I mean, we do still have some busy weeks coming along, I suppose, with getting all sorts of other things sorted, but I suppose
yes, there will be after this weekend some Nomos news.
Yes.
I'm currently, like, it's been a bit of a nightmare trying to get a venue to commit, because a lot of places are either retooling for Christmas or they're shutting down. Like, a lot of places are closing.
And
like
retooling
a lot
probably
of
just means shutting down as well.
Yes, there's like the British catering industry has limped along since the lockdowns were eased and things like that, but none of them have ever really recovered. There are so many either closed or closing venues. Basically, 2/3 of the UK's nightclubs are still closed. So, yay, that's been completely destroyed. But yeah, we're trying. We will find somewhere. We have some good possibilities, but it will be in the Greater London area. I will say it'll be probably slightly less central, but it will have a good transport link. So I'll try and get that. But that's the idea for the next Nomos event. It is going to be Nomos South, and it will be London adjacent. So I will be able to have some good announcements about speakers relatively soon after as well. But
yes.
I want to get tickets on sale before August gets too long in the tooth. I was hoping to have them on sale on the 1st, but that hasn't happened. So we'll have them on sale probably on the 8th, barring any disasters. So that's kind of the solid date I'm setting for ticket sales to start.
We will, of course, also be at the Shieldings event as well. Hopefully.
Yes, we will be.
I see Yasin in the chat. I presume he will be there.
Yes. I will be attending and you'll be speaking. So
yep.
Roles reversed this time.
Indeed.
But like I said, I think we kind of come as a package deal, so it has to be one or the other. Otherwise, people will start to think it's too nepotistic, which is actually kind of fair, honestly. We don't want to take up too many slots. Plus, we do have our own platform, and are very grateful for it, both with the streams here and with the Nomos stuff. So it's nice. It's nice to have an actual community.
There will be time as well over the course of the weekend, I think, where Maven is wanting to take some people aside and sort of have a brief discussion about, what are plans in the long term, who's wanting to do what sort of events, and what support either they can give to us or we can give to them. I mean, I can maybe even mention possibly the fact that if you can't make it to Shieldings and you want some Imperium books, but you would like to buy them from people who you are friends with, maybe if you're at Nomos events, you might even be able to acquire some. But we shall see.
Yes. I will once again say a thank you to our members, because I always forget to do that. James Mary, HK9410, Not Sure, GC Mitt, Windtalker, S Smith, Portrait Steel, Sog Addict, and Tank Imperator. Thank you for being long-time supporters of the channel. It does help, and it is basically, in terms of monthly income, the majority of what we get. So it keeps us ticking over, keeps us able to buy books, and generally makes this a little bit less of a painful time sink in some ways. Not that there's much money involved really in being a distant these days. It's basically by design impossible to make money out of it if you're doing it right. But hopefully we can flip that and change that in future. But that's long term. For now, we're just trying to put out good information and entertain you guys, and generally have a good chat. So, oh god, Wimpy. They actually have a Wimpy burger here, if you can believe it. Oof. Like they still have a Wimpy. It's weird.
See, Patino in chat is asking, did I talk to Bob Murphy? I did briefly after one of his lectures, and we made brief sort of joke on the absolute confusion and hilarity that is modern monetary theory and monetarists in general.
Oh, Aurelian Nautilus Caesar says, I just left the 60K job at Amazon because it made me miserable. Yeah, I can imagine. So here's my $5 for you guys. Thank you very much, and I hope you have another job lined up.
Yeah, I was glad you're also stepping down from the operating seat of the machine.
I'm gonna say, yeah, the best way I've seen Amazon described is a giant Rube Goldberg machine of human suffering, which I think is a great description of Amazon.
Yeah.
But that's probably everything. Thank you guys. Thank you to everyone who donated. I'm not sure if we'll have a stream on Monday or not. Do you have anything planned?
I don't have anything planned to do on Monday. I do have something I'm recording on Sunday. As people may know, I'm doing part of the live reading on Populist Delusion on Pete's channel. So
Do you want to link that in the thing?
well, it's not going to be out for a while anyway, so I can maybe.
Well, I can just link his channel.
Yeah, if you want.
I will put that. Sorry, I'm just getting it up here.
I don't know. There's sort of other stuff I'm looking to kind of focus on at the moment as well. So it's not to say that we won't have streams. It's just we might be slightly more back to once a week, depending on what works schedule wise. Because some Thursdays you'll be traveling, or
Yeah, I was
case
actually
on
thinking
some Mondays. So
if we're not doing anything on Monday, if I can find the time, I was thinking of having when it's most convenient to people, maybe having a community stream this weekend. I'll ask people on Saturday when's best for them, but it's well overdue, I think. I'll obviously give channel members first refusal at spots, but I will try and have a chat in my Discord that'll be broadcast live here as just a long overdue community stream. It will of course be open to people. I'll generally drag guests in and out to try and stop it being chaotic. But I think that's a good idea. It's not something I want to do particularly regularly because honestly, those streams can, if you do them too much, they kind of tank your channel, to be honest, because they don't tend to be the most frequented content. But every once in a while, every few months, I might try and do one of those just because the community of people is pretty big. My Discord's still pretty active, and there are a lot of you guys who are very regularly in the chat. So I want to make sure we're having a good kind of sourcing of discussion. And I think it'll just be interesting.
As well as we've kind of said before, we would rather not kind of phone it in and make stuff that we're not at least somewhat interested in. And so that if that means that either it's one stream a week or the streams a week are, an hour to 90 minutes-ish, then I think that's better than just making stuff that people would not necessarily be wasting their time on, but could maybe invest their time more.
Yes, but I think a proper community stream is a bit long overdue. So it'll be a good little reward for people who've been supporters, because a lot of you guys have really stuck with us. Yeah, like I said, despite us not having the most consistent schedule sometimes, I can't talk today, because that's mostly with us, having to work and do live stuff. So, but anyway, I'm rambling a little bit here, so I'll wrap it up. Thank you for setting up the notes for this, Evelyn, because this really was kind of your stream. I think it's something people don't think about from this angle, because a lot of the woe is the third world is very much the area of the kind of the globalist left.
Yeah.
So it's something that I think we need to think about, and there's a lot of areas like this that the conversation has been completely abdicated, and it shouldn't be.
Agreed.
But anyway, that's by the by. But I will just say goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Good night, everybody, or whatever time zone it is.